You know, I have all these games, I just don't know what I want to play. How's anyone supposed to decide with all of these games? Granted, most people aren't crazy and own 1,000 games, but that is besides the point.
Hey, I've got an idea.
What do you want this time, Talking Helmet?
You should review this game.
I don't know, I mean, it's been a while since we've even reviewed a game. I mean, I don't think something like this would be a good idea, man.
Why? Because it's controversial? Nah, don't worry about it.
I mean, I do kind of want to replay it.
Then do it.
Fine. You talked me into it. People get mad, though. It's your fault. This time, on That Game Review Show, I'm going to be reviewing the legendary DmC Devil May Cry.
The camera spotted you. They must have been looking out for you. You'll have to take it out.
I know. Here comes trouble.
I'm not safe here.
Let go.
There are few games as divisive as the reboot to the beloved Devil May Cry franchise. DmC Devil May Cry, even from its initial announcement, was pretty widely hated by fans of the original series. Dante with his black hair and his smoking, yeah, that didn't go over very well with a lot of the fan base. Which I completely understand, actually. As the game is starting, Dante is really nothing but an asshole. Yeah, I don't like him much.
Kind. Yes. What makes you think I give a shit?
But as he develops a bit more, I actually end up liking him more than classic Dante on a human level. I will always love classic Dante though. He's so over the top it's a little hard not to love him.
We're all satisfied.
But that's besides the point. Let's get into the meat of this review. The first review this channel has had in... ooh boy. Ninja Theory was helming this game of the series, the studio widely known for Heavenly Sword and more recently, Hellblade. Capcom was super impressed by their work on Heavenly Sword, and when Capcom decided to reboot the series based on the lower sales of Devil May Cry 4, they chose a Western developer to create it. And I think they did a pretty good job. The combat is crunchy, the world design is fun and interesting, and some of the narrative choices were done pretty well. Note how I said, some. While I think the game as a whole is really good, honestly what they did with the story and dialogue, while parts of it are really good, on a whole is just very disappointing, especially when compared to the wittiness of the old games.
And I got a bigger dick.
If you're gonna continue your research in the next do your homework first.
Certain scenes could have been written so much more creatively. I understand that Ninja Theory was trying to appeal to more of a mass market who thinks swearing is cool and edgy,
Get your filthy fucking claw off my trailer.
while puns and one-liners are way too cheesy.
I think that look suits you better.
This is my point. They're too focused on making a game too edgy for me, but completely forgot that one-liners are, while incredibly cheesy, actually used to be an integral part of the action flick.
The classic games are like the over-the-top action movies from the 80s and 90s, where Bruce Campbell is spewing out one-liners left and right. This game here, though, is like a newer action movie where the main characters can do nothing but be gritty and just say fuck all the time. And while the one-liners could be pretty bad, trust me, I've heard quite a few bad ones, I'd much rather listen to one-liners than listen to, you know, emo Dante swearing all the time.
Groovy.
all this comes down to preference. It's not a deal breaker. The story itself is still pretty interesting. The premise of the story is that the Demon King Mundus... Mundus?
But Mundus did not rise alone.
Come out and show yourself, Mundus!
I'll rule alone. I didn't help you destroy Mundus so that you could take his place.
I'm gonna go with Mundus since that's how they pronounce it in the game. The Demon King Mundus and his really attractive mistress Lilith rule the world for some reason, even to the point of blackmailing the President of the United States.
Mr. President.
The world itself is ran by the demons, and you'll see throughout the game with the creepy white words that pop up everywhere that they're subconsciously influencing the humans. This is actually straight up from the movie They Live, which gave us all one of the best one-liners ever. You know, the one that Duke Nukem later used.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Demons run the news.
Terrorist responsible for the recent attacks at
Demons create the soda. Demons hide everywhere and torture people who don't conform. They're everywhere. As an idea, this is really interesting. A little contrived, but interesting. There is a resistance, of course. A terrorist organization known as The Order, run by the mysterious masked man. Of course, since it's a resistance against, demons, they're going to meet up with Dante eventually. We see Mundus freak out because reasons? Just out of nowhere, he gets upset because of Dante, who he wants dead because he's the son of Mundus's brother Sparta, and he sends the demon hunter after Dante. We find Dante sleeping in bed after a hard night of partying with some strippers, and his magic tattoo then kinda just seems to heal him. A knock at his camper door gets him out of bed. Then we are introduced to the main love interest, Kat, a psychic who can see into limbo. She warns a rather naked Dante that the hunter is coming to get him.
He's dragging you into limbo.
She was a little too late though, since the hunter drags Dante into limbo and then goes for him, causing his camper to flip over, and one of the most interesting placements of air pizza ensue. So what is limbo? Limbo in mythology is seen as the world in between the worlds. Doesn't really matter which worlds, but in this instance it seems to be between Earth and Hell. This is where the majority of the game takes place and is one of the most creative instances of level design. Something the old games didn't do all that great was having really creative levels. For the first game specifically, the game just takes place in the Malay Island castle with some small sections taking place in places like an underground ship or in a weird forest, eventually culminating into going into the underworld. While not bad in and of itself, after spending a whole game inside a large castle, you get a bit tired of it. With Limbo, usually the locations can vary quite a bit. A boardwalk style with a huge demon chasing you? Check. Upside down city in which in the real world is just a normal city but in Limbo ends up being a prison? Check. Inside of the demonic soda factory? Check. That's not to say the level design is perfect, but it's pretty interesting, especially when the world is treated as an enemy and try to get into the Dante killing game. After exploring the docks and killing any enemies you find along the way, you end up fighting the Hunter, who, especially after you've played the game and have all the weapons, is a piece of cake, first boss and everything. Dante walks away from the chaos and Kat comes to grab him, saying that her boss knows Dante and wants to meet him. Dante, reluctant at first, is then guilt-tripped by Kat, who pointed out that she helped him fight the Hunter. Dante then agrees and they drive off into the sunset. Once at the Order HQ, Kat and Dante meet this mysterious figure that Dante doesn't recognize.
Dante, it really is you. You don't remember me? No.
The man explains that Dante isn't human, and his amnesia, who Dante claimed was a result of meningitis, was fake. While trying to explain his case, Dante, very rudely might I add, asks who the man is, and he is revealed, not surprisingly, to be Virgil, Dante's twin brother. Hard to imagine considering their faces are pretty similar and all. Dante is, of course, reluctant, but plays along and hears Virgil's pitch to get him to join their team. Dante declines, but when asked for a chance to at least show Dante who he really is, he goes along with it. They soon head to their childhood home of Paradise. Kat sends Dante into limbo, and Kat expresses her concern about Dante's apathy regarding humanity.
Is this really going to work? He doesn't seem to care.
He's raw. Just like you were when I first found you.
Inside the limbified mansion, Dante discovers a portrait of his mother, Eva, and inside the portrait, I guess, is the power of the Osiris Scythe, a variation of the Rebellion sword that Dante usually uses. He is then ambushed by demons, who he quickly cuts down with the Angelic Scythe. Later on, he picks up the Arbiter Axe, another form of the Rebellion, a demonic heavy hitter, and uses it to take out the enemies. It was found in a picture of his father, Sparta, and conveniently the face was torn off of the painting. He finds a blue rose, a not-so-clever reference to a gun from Devil May Cry 4, and we are introduced to one of the main platforming gimmicks, the Ophian Whip. It has two forms, Demonic Pull and Angelic Pull. Demonic Pull drags most enemies in certain pieces of level geometry towards you, while the Angelic Pull sweeps Dante off of his feet towards enemies and anchor points. It's a pretty fun mechanic and helps spruce up the otherwise uninteresting platforming. And soon the level comes crashing down around him, Dante quickly making a break for the rift that got him here, and fashionably slides out, like girls in my DMs because I'm boring and make videos on YouTube. Now that Dante knows who he is, he decides to join up with Kat and Virgil on their quest to get rid of the demon hierarchy. Virgil, in what I found to be an interestingly designed cutscene, explains that their father, Sparta, fell in love with an angel, Eva, and had two boys. For Virgil and Dante, obviously. This made them Nephilim, half angel and half demon. In a historical context, however, I have found that Nephilim are actually the, quote, offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. So in layman's terms, half angel, half human. This is closer to the original Devil May Cry games, actually, where they are the sons of a human and a demon. But, you know what? It works. I think in Darksiders, the Nephilim aren't necessarily the offspring of angels and demons. It's been a while since I've played, but I think they're just another race that's super powerful or something. I don't know. I gotta go back and replay them sometime. Maybe another review? Virgil also explains that Eva was killed by Mundus. He ate her heart. I would've gone for the liver, but that's just me. Anyways, Mundus imprisoned Sparta in what I can only assume is hell, but not before he wiped Dante and Virgil's memories and sent them off into the world. Dante, a life of fighting, Virgil, a life of privilege. I'm not going to go in depth with the levels from this point on, I think you get the idea. Kill demons, cutscenes, that's pretty much it. As Dante takes out the big demons of later levels, being the Succubus, one of my least favorite boss fights in this game, and Bob Barbas, one of the most interesting looking bosses in most games. Hell, just look at the segment of the level before you actually fight him. They give you the Eric's Gauntlets and the Aquila Spitting Blades, alternate versions of the angelic and demonic weapons. In the level with the demon Phineas, also the same level where you are introduced to Devil Trigger, I probably should have mentioned that, Dante asks for his help on how to defeat Mundus, and Phineas somehow knows that his wife, Lilith, is pregnant with the next demon king. And now Dante has a goal.
Mundus. Kill Lilith. Kill the child.
Oh yeah, also the First Order hideout got raided by SWAT and Kat gets kidnapped, spilling the beans on Virgil being the leader of the First Order, but not the fact that he's Dante's brother and fellow Nephilim, which is super convenient.
Mundus knows less than I thought. He knows my name, but that's it. Not that I'm your brother, nor that I'm Nephilim.
Dante goes to Devil's Dalliance, a strip club that Lilith runs for some reason. After fighting his way through an admittedly really awesome level, he ends up going against Mundus' unborn spawn, with Lilith being sucked into its stomach. Dante takes Lilith hostage, the baby somehow being re-unborn? And they set up a video for Mundus to trade Lilith for Kat. Mundus agrees, and I guess he was willing to keep his end of the bargain? What I don't get is they would have had to upload it somewhere off of a computer with internet. How couldn't the demons have tracked them down to their new safe house? But that's besides the point. Fucking Terrell. During the trade, Dante and Virgil keep an eye on things, but in a strange change of character, Virgil actually shoots and kills both the baby and Lilith in cold blood.
Fuck.
The hell did you do that for?
I had to.
You don't fuck with a god.
The military starts shooting and the trio manage to drive off, but not before Mundus shoots out parts of Limbo at them. I'm not quite sure how that works. Now, this change was a huge point of upset for the Devil May Cry fans that actually gave this game a shot. Virgil straight up shoots Lilith. Did he have a reason for it? Sure, but this scene was a serious departure from the original Virgil, who was based around a sense of honor that Dante didn't quite embody.
I had to.
The scene flies right in the face of that. While I personally dislike the scene, it sets up a small part later on in the story. It also further offsets the original Virgil from this new Virgil, which I understand what they are trying to do, but it's also a little counterintuitive for the end of the game. Once back at the safe house, they make a plan to attack Mundus at his tower. The plan goes according to plan, and both Dante and Virgil make their way to the tippy top. After a small puzzle and some character development between Virgil and Dante,
You make quite the team. Stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better looking. And I got a bigger dick.
they unlock Mundus' office. Dante goes in while Virgil waits off to the side, and Dante provokes Mundus by rubbing the death of his child in his face to get him away from the Hellgate, the big portal-looking thing sitting in his office behind him.
Why did you kill my child?
Because you killed my mother.
So it was revenge. I see.
It was more than that. You know, Mundus, you're right. It wasn't for mankind, it was for revenge. I gotta tell you, killing your child like that, watching it explode into little wet chunks, hearing you scream like one of you little demon bitches, priceless.
Once Mundus attacks Dante and the two fly out of the office, Virgil goes in and shuts down the Hellgate using his Yamato. Mundus begins to rip apart Dante's chest, but not before Virgil stabs Mundus in the back. Hooray, the day is saved! Oh wait, not really, because Mundus had enough power left to become a giant, ugly human dude.
Two sons of Sparta.
You ready for this?
Sons of Sparta.
We can kill him now?
Hellgate is shut.
You will die.
Never!
Unsurprisingly, Dante and Virgil defeat Mundus and the monster disappears. Or dies. I think he dies. I think you see him in the cutscene. With the world around them largely destroyed, Dante, Virgil, and Kat look out at what they've done. They saved humanity from Mundus, and somehow with doing that, Limbo has now meshed into the human world, and now demons are living amongst humans. I'm sure that'll end well for everyone, especially when everyone seems to just be standing there tweeting about it. The world is saved, and while Dante and Kat are ready to help and live alongside humanity, Virgil reveals his true plans to enslave the humans, whom he claims are too weak to save themselves. He also argues that since Virgil and Dante are the ones that took down Mundus, they deserve to take over from him. Didn't seem to fuck.
I'm sorry.
Dante tells Virgil how Kat, a human, saved them and played a major role in taking down Mundus, but Virgil didn't seem to get it. The two then fight in what I feel is a super dramatic and climactic fight, especially after the F-fest that was Mundus. Sure, it was reminiscent of the final battle of Devil May Cry 3. I feel it works better here because you spend the whole game helping Virgil, only to find out at the end that he's, well, a prick. You feel Dante's frustration, and this game is way more personal here than it was in DmC 3, where most of Dante and Virgil's past happen off-screen. The fight ends with Dante impaling Virgil with his massive sword, pinning him to the ground. Kat begs Dante to stop and spare Virgil's life, and Dante reluctantly agrees. He pulls the sword out of Virgil's chest. The two say goodbye, Virgil with a touching,
I loved you, brother.
and he disappears. Dante and Kat stand there, and Dante gets upset, understandable as he was just lied to by his brother, and is confused about who he really is now. Kat comforts him and says that he is Dante and that's all he needs to be, and the two walk away, Dante groping her ass. The ass grab was added into the definitive edition along with some gameplay and graphical changes. In the original, the screen punches into Dante's Devil Trigger face before cutting to black. Now that we're done with the story, let's get into the gameplay. It's very much so Devil May Cry meets God of War, more focused on just attacking and less about doing super complex combos, like some people can do in the older games. I could never do the cool shit, so I don't really find it all that big of a deal. You're armed with the Rebellion, a large broadsword used for your neutral melee attacks. I like the overall design of the sword. It's very Western and organic compared to the original's very Japanese look. Most of the combos, as far as I know, are all lifted straight out of the original series, at least after getting the proper upgrades. Dante's iconic guns, Ebony and Ivory, are also here, sporting a new redesign as well. The main combat mechanic of the game, switching between angelic and demonic weapons, is done by holding down the triggers. Left trigger gives you the angelic weapons Aquila and Osiris, and through the right trigger you can access the Eryx and the Arbiter. You chain these weapons together for some awesome looking combos trying to fill up the style gauge. Most DmC fans find the system overly simplistic, and while it is definitely more simple, that was what Capcom had intended in order to appeal to a much broader audience. Overall, the game is definitely easier than the previous games, but I found it to be far more enjoyable. Not to say I don't like the older games. In fact, Devil May Cry 4 is really fun, and it was my introduction into the series. I think Ninja Theory's attempt at a Devil May Cry game worked incredibly well. Granted, that might just be the fact I've played through this game an ungodly amount of times talking, having played every difficulty on PS3 to get the Platinum Trophy, and a few more times on PS4 once the Definitive Edition came out. The lock-on mechanic took away one of the shoulder buttons on the controller. Both of them had been originally to dodge, but the optimal way of binding the lock-on is one of the shoulder buttons. I didn't miss the lock-on much, and I rather enjoyed using both shoulder buttons to be able to dodge. As for the difficulty, I welcomed the harder difficulties they added. It gave me more excuses to replay the game. Realistically, they didn't change much. My favorite add-on was Turbo Mode, which made the game itself play a lot faster, making the subsequent replays of the game go by much quicker. Personally, my biggest issue with Definitive Edition was the fact they got rid of Virgil's fedora. I really liked it. Now let's get into some of my main issues. Actually, just nitpicks. While I don't feel like this is a perfect game by any means, most of my issues are just personal. Let's look at some consistency issues. Where did Dante and Virgil get their weapons after Sparta sent them away? I guess Dante keeps it in his Nephilim tattoo? I guess that's a tattoo. Which, okay, I get it. It only comes out when Dante is in Limbo, so maybe it first appeared when Dante was first dragged into Limbo. That's fair enough, I guess. And when Earth and Limbo come together, he gets full access to it. But for some reason, Virgil, even on Earth, gets full access to his katana, the Yamato. Maybe he doesn't get the magic-y parts. I don't know. It's another weapon of Sparta, but it doesn't get sent away while Virgil is on Earth. Maybe it has something to do with Yamato being the key to shutting down the Hellgates, much like its purpose as a key in the original games, but it is a pretty big inconsistency. Then we also get into the question of, where did he get it? Maybe he found it when he originally went to Paradise, but then why would Dante have already had his sword? How exactly does Phineas know who Dante is, or that Mundus is expecting a baby? Or how, despite him being able to see things differently with his robot eye, how does that make Dante able to traverse through another part of Limbo? Makes no real sense. The different difficulties don't really add much to the game. The enemies that spawn end up being different the higher up you go on the scale, but until you get to the much higher difficulties where enemies have their own devil triggers, it's no real problem. Another issue being Devil Trigger. It makes the world washed out and white while turning Dante into classic Dante essentially, with white hair and a red jacket to match. If you want to separate the games, don't add things like this, or the wig scene.
Not in a million years.
The scene is in poor taste and it alienates the fans of the original. I understand what they were going for, but even further upsetting the fan base shouldn't be their goal. Why is it, despite Dante's sword leaving a massive hole in Virgil's chest, does just not pushing the blade further spare him? Sure, he ends up dying at the beginning of the DLC, Virgil's downfall, but how exactly is Dante supposed to spare Virgil's life? No matter what, Virgil should have been dead then and there. However, as this series gave us this, and this,
You were the first first one to know about my vengeance. It looks like I'm getting closer.
This shouldn't be that much of an issue. If anything, Virgil shouldn't have died in the DLC. The new design of the Yamato is boring. The old one had a more stylistic take of the katana, whereas the new version is a lot more plain. Though I do like how Virgil uses it almost like a cane, it adds a little bit to his character. Personally, I really love Virgil's new design. It's more of a modern samurai look, and I do really enjoy that. I have high hopes for the future of this series. Sure, this game didn't do very well, largely to the massive backlash from fans, but I would still love to see a sequel made. The Virgil as a villain dynamic will be way more personal than it was in Devil May Cry 3, and I'll feel way worse for him when he eventually becomes Nero Angelo. In an interview that I cannot find for the life of me, one of the higher-ups at Capcom expressed interest at seeing both the classic series and the reboot series running side by side, and I agree with the sentiment. I feel like the games are different enough to where one won't necessarily cannibalize the market for the other. Of course, the original fans will go for Devil May Cry 5, but I feel like with some refinement, there will be a growing fan base for the reboot series as well. Me personally, I'll be waiting for both. Right now, the future is uncertain. While there have been rumors that Devil May Cry 5 has been in development, growing ever stronger with the recent years, we still don't know anything for certain. What I've heard, with it being a more personal story for Dante following Devil May Cry 4, it'll lead to some interesting development from the character, who, frankly, has largely stayed the same, not counting Devil May Cry 2. As Devil May Cry 4 was my first foray into the Devil May Cry universe, consider me interested. As for the reboot, Ninja Theory was busy with Hellblade after DmC was released, so as for what they're gonna do next, who knows? Personally, I hope it's DmC 2, but considering the amount of controversy regarding the reboot, they might think it's smarter to reconsider their choices and go with something more original. Granted, that choice might be down to Capcom, and I'm sure if they really want it to happen, they'll find someone who can take the reins.
Said it. The price to pay for power?
Thank you so much for watching, and, like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Tell me how I'm wrong about liking this game down below, whatever you want. So what you're looking at here is kind of like a scale, I guess you could say. On any review that I do for that game review show, I want to rank the games I, review. This doesn't mean that any game on the scale is necessarily bad, which, granted, bad games will end up popping up anyways. This is just to show which games I ended up liking more. Granted, there's bad games that I like. I mean, it's not impossible. Maybe later on I'll rank the games Terrell reviews on this chart. I mean, at least the ones I've played. I can't really rank the games I haven't played because I haven't played them, but you get what I mean. If this works out, I will just keep doing it. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, like I said, thank you for watching. Leave a like. Check out my personal channel at James the Viking Vlogs, and also James the Viking Plays, which I haven't touched in a while. You can find me on twitch.tv/JamesViking. And you can find Terrell at TDSK17 on pretty much everything. So, yeah. I'll see you all next time.